All right. I just felt like doing this spur at the moment, whatever you say, whatever the saying is. Spur of the moment. That's it. My apologies. Um, I was thinking out loud last night about this Danganronpa fan game, Project Eden's Garden, and thankfully I'm recording this after talking my thoughts aloud because I was very highly critical of the game. Only because I was approaching the fan game as official, like Danganronpa game. Since the creators are trying their best. Clearly, from the presentation, how well the sprites look, how well the 3D environments look, they're trying to emulate as much as possible the official vibe and look of the original Danganronpa games. And there was this one guy named Fuss. I'm not an English major. I don't know how to pronounce that. I not finished college either, but this YouTube user, did an analysis of Project Dean's Garden, Chapter 1, and his overall critiques about the tone setting and world building of this fan game, and how, if it doesn't click with what Danganronpa has inspired to be, I'll leave the rest for you guys to watch. It's a pretty good video. I enjoyed it. 2 hours and so forth. So I'm going to give my own attempt of my own input, I guess, into the Danganronpa game of Project Eden's Garden. Let's see if there's any images I could just put over. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm doing this spur of the moment again. That's clearly not working. There we go. This'll work. So I have a few different things I wanted to do for my own unique critiques and nitpicks about this Danganronpa game that's trying to be as official as possible. Since it's trying to be as official as possible, then I might as well, like I said, approach it as if it were an official game, and will critique it as hard as I can, like I would any other game. And I try to be pretty critical of even the games I adore to death, like Ace Attorney games, Miles Edgeworth Investigations, that sort of thing, and Danganronpa V3. But I'll try to be critical analyze this through this chapter and trial specifically through a critical lens as well. It's not going to be organized. I think the first thing I might as well just get on with it with the first critique I have is the 45. It is a very long trial, and there's two parts of that make it a little too long. A little longer than it should be, especially for a first trial, which is fine. You can have long trials. I mean, long first trials if they're not too tediously long. But I think there's a lot of bloat with two particular portions. One is the more obvious point: the final boss, or the boss minigame against the culprit, who I will not reveal until later. Until I guess I give a spoiler warning. The boss fight, they did this little bullet hell sort of minigame, and it was pretty good. The problem is it's incredibly difficult, like more difficult than Danganronpa V3's final trial minigames, harder than Hangman's Gambit 2.0 from Danganronpa 2, and a very notoriously difficult and almost impossible to play minigame. And it was similar. That's what the minigame reminded me of. So it just needs, if the fan game continues on, and if there's any tinkering with the first chapter, that would be something to take note of, is to notch it down on the difficulty of the final boss minigame, but the other minigames are very well done. Again, it looks official, it sounds official. Those guys did a really good job, in spite of any hard biting things I might say later down the road. The second point where it bloats is the explanation of how the murderer committed their murder. Caveat: I am not a chemist. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a scientist of any sort. I don't know if any type of exposed battery would cause a person to get electrocuted if the battery or exposed wires gets into the water. I don't know how exactly that works, so I'm not going to critique it on that point. I'm just going to fly past it. What I'm specifically want to talk about is how the explanation for this battery water trick was very bloated, and spoilers from here on out. Going to talk about spoiler territory here. Before we get to the killer, I'll reveal how the killer killed their victim. It's very simple. The killer is on one floor and the victim is in a room on a lower floor that is full of water, and the two rooms connect through a vent. And what the killer did was tie the battery to a string or rope, and when the victim was in prime position in the water, when the killer made sure that the victim was in the water, they lowered the battery by lowering the rope through that vent, and it hit the water and it electrocuted the victim. And now it took me 45 seconds to explain that, and it took our poor protagonist, I remember it being somewhere around 40 minutes in order to explain this, or 35, 40 minutes to explain something that is really simple. And it should be simple for a first case. It should be relatively simple, at least, compared to anything that comes after. But it takes so long to explain what should be a simple trick and it's not a way of showing that the protagonist is dumber than he thinks. And, part of the theme is that these are spoiled. This cast, compared to any other cast, is spoiled, snarky adolescents who think they're better than everyone else. And that I don't think that's a good enough excuse for the protagonist taking so long to explain something so simple, because if it was an intentional way of showing that the protagonist is not as smart as he thinks he is, then there would have at least been attempts by other people to quote unquote help him out for the sake of making themselves look smarter, right? Even if they flail about a little bit, they'll still contribute to the protagonist's development of how the murder happened. And there was very minimal amount of any helping as to the how. Figuring out the how, it felt like only the protagonist was doing anything. Speaking of not carrying through with the snarky personalities, which again I adore that angle of them being spoiled brats, and they do a pretty good job of portraying that most of them are pretty bratty and arrogant as ultimates, as pampered ultimates. We get to the killer. Spoiler on who the killer is. It is Ava. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ava, the sidekick or de facto sidekick of our protagonist, whose name I forgot. Daimitsu, I think, something like that. Sidekick Ava, our math Olympian something. I'm not in tune with the real world. Sorry. Some sort of math whiz. Is the killer. She's the killer. She killed the victim with this battery on the rope trick, or battery on the string trick. And once she's revealed to be the killer, she has the typical meltdown you would expect from a first killer, especially one who is snarky and spoiled. It's like Leon cranked up to a 7, I'd say it's pretty good. There's just one. I will commend them for that. The problem I have is, and now we're getting into new critique. We're moving on from the critique of the bloatedness of the latter parts of the trial, and now we're getting to just a separate critique. How when Ava was discovered to be the culprit, and after the vote and after everything was settled, there was no sense of emotion, no sense of anger, and most importantly, no sense of cockiness from the protagonist that their fellow smart person, that the protagonist and Ava are like outcast, not only outcasts, they're two of the smartest seeming and two of the most confident, two of the people that are most confident in their abilities, in their mental abilities, and they're the de facto smarties of the group. And Ava committing this murder should have brought about something. I don't expect him to be emotional about it. He's snarky, he's spoiled, and I don't expect him to get crying. I expect something along the lines of, since he's spoiled, I expect something along the lines of maybe anger that she would betray him, and as one of the good ones, as one of the smart ones. But more importantly, I would expect, or there should be, some sort of like cocky arrogance that we're the smart ones, but you were too dumb. I was smarter than you. You fell for Tozu, the mastermind, whatever you want to call it. You fell for the mastermind's killing game. You were too dumb to be above the killing game and try to figure out a way to outwit the mastermind and unwind the killing game and defeat the killing game itself instead of playing along, right? That I was smart and you were too dumb. I was so much smarter than you, and and then maybe talk to everybody. Well, I don't know. Maybe pound his chest a little bit in front of everyone else for being so much smarter than Ava, for not falling for the killing game trick, the trick of committing murder for a incredibly low chance of surviving through the trial. There is that element. So there's that critique out of the way. Critique number 2 or whatever, done. Third critique I could do is there's not a lot of I think before I get to that, I would like to critique that the overall cast dynamic is really good. Danganronpa 1, the beginning cast dynamic, especially in like trials 1 and 2, is like stranger danger. I have no idea who any of these people are, and my life is on the line, and any one of us could be the killer, and just don't want to do, aren't really open all that much quite yet. Once you get to trials 4, 5, and 6 of Danganronpa 1, then yes, they do finally start opening up. Like, it's the same 6 survivors. They start to be more open about their emotions, their relationships, their lives, and so forth. And Danganronpa V3, I'm not going to talk about Danganronpa 2. That should be its own thing. Danganronpa V3 has a good cast dynamic of just them being so over the top and so exaggerated in their personalities, as if they were either A, brainwashed after all, which spoilers I won't talk about, or B, really are actors, which again, spoilers I won't talk about, but it's a very distinct and intentional cast dynamic that they're all very accentuated in their personalities, that instead of being scared and closed off, they're all like, most of them are contributing, being more extroverted than they might usually be in such a life or death situation, and letting their personalities and their characters and their talents shine through, and how it all mixes together in that each person, letting that shine through in the trials. This game does something that I am impressed with for a fan game, that keeping a not just having a cast dynamic that makes sense, unlike Danganronpa 2, which again I'll get to later. But not only that, but the cast dynamics of this fan game are distinct from the beginning cast. The beginning cast dynamics of this fan game, are distinct from the cast dynamics of the other Danganronpa games, and it does make it feel like it's in its own unique place, right? In Danganronpa. So that is something I really appreciated. And one more critique before we go, one more praise before we go back to critiquing, is that there's a lot, the characters are really great. I loved Ava, I loved Wolfgang, I love Eloise and Grace and the Archer Man and the two people beside the protagonist in the trial seating placement, and the little girl with the fan always covering her mouth. I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but maybe she has the distinct mark of a mastermind, the duck lip. But anyways, I'm anything else? Any other characters I really, really liked? Sorry, I'm kind of blanking. And the one girl with the Russian looking hat. I don't know what it's called, sorry. The one with the reddish hair and the Russian looking hat. Also fun personality. The other character, this is going to go back into the critique real quick, but one of the characters that, I'm sorry if this sounds racist or bigoted, but the one beside the protagonist to the right that I thought was Native American because I didn't see the investigations, I didn't see the prologue. I'll just call her a minority character. And now we lead, again, apologies if I got that wrong, but now we lead to the critique. Another critique is that even Danganronpa V3 had more minority technically more minority characters than this game. Angie is definitely black. Gonta Kaito seemed mixed race, and everybody, or some sort of minority, and everybody else was white or Japanese, or both maybe. This game has, I appreciate that it has minority representation in two of its characters, but it feels like, V3 is close to the same amount of minority characters, right? And I'm I'm not including women I'm not including women as part of the minority character thing, because every Danganronpa game has a equal or equal-ish amount of males and females. It's not a gender problem. It's like a race thing, right? And it feels like this game, maybe, considering it's a fan game and it's not a official game from Japanese authors, I was, intrigued by the notion that there isn't any other minority race characters other than the two, the Archer and then the one sitting right next to the protagonist. But, 2 is better than none, but 3 or 4 or so would be good. And again, it's not a woman thing, and it's not a sexuality thing either, right? Sexuality and gender is like, that is no problem in the Danganronpa series, mainline or fan games. But yeah, just something for other aspiring fan game creators, or any aspiring authors of any medium should, take note of, just to keep track of, the diversity. And you can always, if you're always unsure about something, you can always ask a friend, a friend who is that minority, if you're ever unsure about something. And if you're, as long as you're close enough, right, not strangers. But anyways, that's another kind of critique, kind of not, and we'll push through that. One trivial petty critique I have is the woman to the left of the protagonist, the bulky pink-haired character who with the apron, I think. I don't remember her name or talent. It's something about some sort of white, blue collar job, I thought. I'm sorry. It's been so long since I've seen the trial or the prologue, but the pink, butch looking, I hope that's not insulting, lady that sits right next to the protagonist to the left of him has a accent that feels like a fake southern drawl, and she never says y'all or anything. It's like, as someone who's descended from a southerner and knows what is pretty well attuned to how southerners talk down there and in the American South, or the U.S. South, it is a little cringy, but again, the attempt is a little cringy, but again, that's just my own, trivial, petty critique. Shoot. How long has this been going? 22 minutes. I'll keep going. I think there was a few other things I wanted to talk about. It's okay for the first case to have a easier to guess than not victim and easier to guess than not killer, right? The themes of a wolf in sheep's clothing and an important character dying in chapter 1, and the betrayal, someone important to the protagonist dying in chapter 1 or being relevant to the murder in chapter 1. Ava's betrayal of the protagonist, and Ava being the one to bite from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, to commit the first sin and commit the first murder, or first official murder. I don't remember if chapter 0 had a murder. I think it was a murder from like years before the game started, but I don't know. She committed the first sin as Ava, as the Eve sort of character. Most people can get that. And again, it's the first trial. It doesn't have to be a mind-blowing twist like V3 had the benefit of being written by people who had created 2 Danganronpa games before that, so they were able to go all out with V3's case 1, and I think the game is better for that. I think V3 is better for that the best, in my opinion, the best case is the first, and then the rest is just Danganronpa 2 version 2 all over again. It's as a, part of the meta critique that it's like it kind of like being offered a slice of cake. There's a slice of cake on the table and you eat it, you're hooked in, and then the rest of the night is just your mother just going on and on about how you shouldn't have been doing this or that, or, disciplining you and all that. That's how V3 feels to me, right? There's the hook, a really good hook at the beginning of V3, so that you can stay for the whole Metacritic stuff that is basically going on throughout the whole game, because the whole game after chapter 1 is just Danganronpa 2 version 2. But and then again, that's partially an excuse for the authors, partially part of the intentional part of the meta endgame, meta twists, and meta critique of V3. But anyways, I'm getting off top. I'm going a little too far on a tangent. Going back to this game, the first trial doesn't have to blow everyone out of the water. Just a good introduction of the fan game and how it's probably going to work. And it does its job well, for the most part. Something I was thinking about, something that intrigued me, is that Danganronpa 1, 2, and V3, a character important to the protagonist was involved in the murder, like I said previously. And in Danganronpa 2 and V3, a character who is plot important dies in that chapter. And it seems like they're doing, V3 did, Danganronpa 2 did both, Danganronpa V3 did both, but we're in this situation where it's not like V3, it's where the character who's important to the protagonist is more influential and more prominent than the plot important character, right? The plot device character, essentially. That's what the PD stands for in Rantaro PD Amame, plot device. Ha ha ha. But anyways, it's going to be interesting seeing that it's reversed, that this plot important character, Wolfgang, is most definitely going to be more important and more prominent than this character who is directly tied to the protagonist. And that would be the first time I've seen something like that in a Danganronpa game, official or not, but just something interesting. It's not a critique. It's not a compliment. It's just something in my mind. Before we wrap this up, and I apologize that this is so amateurish, but there's always a first for everything, for everyone. And I think there's got to be something else. One more thing. Jeez, I'm sure I'm going to remember it before I... Again, it's a very good fan game. There are a few things that are a little off, but I mean, you can expect that from a fan game. These are mostly new, fresh writers, and young ones at that. Everybody's got to start from somewhere, right? And now I remember the final thing I wanted to say is my concern for this fan game is that it took 5 years to get from the prologue and chapter 0 to chapter 1 uploading, which, in and of itself is not... I'm not complaining about how slow it's taking. I'm just worried about how you can keep doing the numbers and how many victims and killers there are in each case, keeping 13, and considering you don't usually need voice lines for the daily life or investigations, and most of the voice lines are for the trials, you still have to keep 13 voice actors for, if you go at the same pace that has been going on so far, and every chapter taking 5 years, that means you have to keep 13 voice actors staying on the project for 5 years, 10 voice actors staying on the project for 10 years, 8 voice actors staying on the project for 15 years, and 6, or howsoever many are left, for 20 plus years, right? It's just, it is a little worrying to me to think if there were anything catastrophic or anyone who just gives up or I have hope, but they just need to be prepared for whatever's thrown their way, right? And a recommendation for anyone creating or about to create a new fan game, a Danganronpa fan game: do the voice acting last or don't do it at all. Ace Attorney doesn't really have voice acting except for the objection sound effect and the hold it's and the gotchas, every 1, 2, 3, 4 voice bits, voice chip bits or whatever you call it, voiced catchphrases, right? 3 or 4 of them, and the rest of Ace Attorney is just womp 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 womp, chip noises, blah, right? Where it's a substitute for an actual voice. I don't know what the term for that would be, but if you're creating a new fan game or are about to create a new fan game, I would recommend that you do that instead of getting all your voice actors in a row at the start when you're creating the beginning of the creation of your fan game. I mean, Super Danganronpa Another 2, which I think, from a review, I am always spoiled on everything, it seems. No matter if it's a video game or movie or book, but I saw an analysis of Super Danganronpa Another 2, a good fan game from the analysis. According to the analysis, and from what I learned from the analysis, it seemed like a really good game, and it doesn't, if I recall correctly, doesn't originally have voice actors. They are doing some videos with English subs, but originally didn't have any voices in it, I think. And it still was an incredible story, right? It's just, voice actors should, if you're doing a fan game, voice actors should be one of the last things you do, right? If you do it at all, right? Just a recommendation for anyone doing it. And that's enough of me talking. I hope you got something from this, I suppose. Learned something new, or feigned to learn something new. The next up will be a attempt at an analysis of Danganronpa V3. So, thanks for listening to me, and good day.